bringing in fresh dollars into our community of Ottawa. And so when the games go on and visitors come and they go to our Ottawa restaurants or whatever, so the multiplier effect is more real, I would say, when we look at it on a local basis, where in a sense we're taking away maybe some spending that they would have done in their town and they're coming to our town and doing it. Whereas if we're talking about Ottawa people going to the baseball game, they're not going out to eat, they're not going to the bowling alley, so there's not really any economic gain to the stadium there. And so those are some of the nuances with the multiplier that apply, and I'm gonna tease out some of that stuff there. And so yes, you might be, I don't know, do we have any Cubs fans in here? Chicago Cubs? So if you look closely at my thing though, it says CBOT, because it's the Chicago Board of Trade. This shirt is now, I have to think here. Yeah, this shirt is 32 years old. 32-year-old shirt. Yeah, not too bad. You know, it's a little yellow, a little dinged up here and there. I now wear it once a year, but what this shirt was, and this, I'm giving you guys this as a recommendation, is it evolved into being my test shirt. Do you guys have anything special that you bring to a test, a hat or a shirt or something? Well, when I had big tests, I would wear the test shirt for the midterm or the final exam or something, and so that is this shirt. So it's always kind of had a place in my closet, even though now it pretty much gets worn maybe once a year for this baseball conference at best. So it sits up there as a memorial to many anguishing tests and other fun times. What we did when I was an undergrad, your guys' age, I was a junior in college. We went to the Chicago Board of Trade and the Federal Reserve Bank in Chicago. So it was kind of a tour of things. I grew up in Minnesota and I was at St. Cloud State University, about an hour north of the Twin Cities, and so we did a road trip with a couple professors in a van and some other students, and we saw the Chicago Board of Trade and the Federal Reserve. So kind of right up our alley on what we're doing in this class. I'm hoping to set up a trip. Maybe we can try to pull this off still. I've been so busy these last couple weeks to go to the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank. So once we get into our money and banking chapter, maybe I'll try to put together a trip up there. Has anybody been there to the Kansas City Fed, where they actually process money and do things? It's a cool place to visit, so maybe we'll try to do that. All right, so where we left off yesterday was looking at government intervention in the market. And so here we have the government actively doing something to try to correct a wrong. So here the economy falls into recession, and we have I think this was an oil price shock or something, and so we have the economy falling down in terms of output and prices, and the natural way the economy would correct itself is to come back to E3. And so Keynes' prescription again was to use some government policy to try to restore things quicker, was the idea. All right, well, one of the problems that Keynes has is that what about anticipating changes and unanticipated changes? When the government says they're going to do something, people start changing their behavior already. And so part of Keynes' theory runs into problems with this idea of anticipating the effects that the government's going to do, and now we start changing what we're doing ahead of time rather than it being unanticipated. So we'll kind of see that as we move into some future chapters for next week as well. All right, so what I want to wrap up with, that's just kind of a little summary, is that there are some stabilizers that are kind of on autopilot. And we call them automatic stabilizers. So automatic stabilizers. So automatic stabilizers. So this is fiscal policy that is dependent on the level of real GDP and does not need an act of Congress to be put in place. Okay, so this is something that's going to kick in, and the idea of it is to try to have it kick in when the economy is going down. And so I'll put as another bullet before I do a little graph here, is it uses, let me put automatically uses government deficits / surpluses to smooth out the cycles, the ups and downs. All right, so government deficit, budget deficit, what was going on from yesterday? Look back in your notes if you don't have it off the top of your head. This is one you should have off the top of your head. I want everybody to kind of quickly retrieve that from your brains without having to do that. What was going on with the government budget deficit? Government budget deficit. There's a very specific meaning in there. Justin?
Government savings is negative.
Okay, government savings. And what's government saving? Tucker? Taxes is part of it.
Is less than government spending.
Okay, it's the relationship of government spending and tax collection. So it's both of those things to get the deficit. So again, that's an important concept to have here. So with the deficit, I wrote a little bit more yesterday, but let's just kind of, in your brains, deficit means T is less than G. From an equation standpoint, the government did not collect enough taxes to pay for all of their spending. So it did not collect enough taxes to pay for spending in a given year. And a surplus is just the opposite. We just don't talk about it as much because it basically doesn't happen in the United States government. So the surplus would be a situation where T is greater than G. And that was the saving part that you brought up. So we can kind of think about a surplus as that the government has some savings but that one again has happened very rarely over the last 40, 50 years. And then what was so stupid when it happened is that this was during the George Bush era. They said, oh, we have a government surplus, we have excess money. And of course we had a national debt at the time. But at the time they thought, well, let's give it back to the people. And so they took the savings and everybody got a check for various amounts to kind of spread the the excess. We collected too much money from you, and so let's give it back to them, rather than maybe putting it towards the national debt. Might have been kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah.
But from political purposes, it probably helped them gain a few more votes, right? Oh, well, look at this. This politician's giving me some money back, similar to Biden with giving money back for COVID, right? So the political machine doesn't always operate with economic efficiency as the theme that we see kind of time and time again. All right, so let's draw a little graph to kind of help with this concept of a stabilizer. And so here we're going to measure real GDP. And then we're going to be measuring dollars up here. But we're going to do something a little different. And we're going to look at what happens with government spending and tax revenue, big T. So big T again is the tax. G is from our cigarettes, government spending. What happens where the two lines cross with this particular graph?
There's no surplus or
Good, yeah, no, you're right. So there's no surplus or deficit. So they're equal to each other, right? T equals G. What did we call that yesterday in your notes, where T equals G?
governments.
No, it's kind of a special word, out. Balanced budget. The government actually balanced the budget, right? Their spending is equal to their tax collections. And so down here, what I want to do is just simply anchor maybe the ideal situation. So let me start with this model. Ideally, if at full employment, at our long run equilibrium, at full employment, ideally, if at full employment, the government would have a balanced budget. So during kind of normal times of maximum efficiency or whatever, only frictional and structural unemployment. So at full employment, it would be great if we had G equals T. In other words, a balanced budget. Okay, so now this is where this concept of automatic stabilizers comes in. So if the economy falls into recession and falls down to here, so if the actual level of the economy is at a lower level than our full employment, what happened to government spending? It went up. What is the government spending money on when the economy's in recession? Welfare, good. What else? There's some other things. Some food stamps, welfare, somebody else? But there's a big one that we're missing. Somebody other than Jesse? When the economy goes into recession, what happens to unemployment? It goes up. So what's a government program that covers some of that? What's that called, huh? Social Security? No, not for this program anyway. Not welfare, that's what, yeah, Jesse brought up welfare and food stamps. But if you lost your job, do you get some money? Unemployment. Not severance is usually a private thing where a company might give you a severance check. But you get some unemployment insurance. So if you guys look carefully on your pay stub, part of your tax that you're paying every month, even when you have low income, is going into unemployment insurance. So some money's being set aside by the government so that if you lose your job, it's one of our social safety nets, and that would kick in. So all of those things might start to raise government spending. So let's do this a little carefully here. So at Y1, we have a recession, and there's an increase in government spending automatically due to an increase in unemployment claims, unemployment insurance claims. Maybe a few more people qualify for welfare program. Some people qualify now for some food assistance. We'll just put food stamps, even though food assistance is probably the more modern word. So some government programs are dependent upon income. The only way you qualify for these is I lost my job, or my income's too low and I have a couple kids, right? Whatever. So these are income dependent things. And so government spending goes up when we're in recession. What happened to tax collections? They went down. So now tax collections are at T1. So we have an increase in G, and we have a decrease in tax collections due to less income. Recall that we have our income after tax. So if we look at our big T is equal to our tax rate times our gross income. So big T is tax collections. And you guys have this in your notes, I think, from another time, but let's just do it here again. Big T is tax collections or tax revenue for the government. Little t is the tax rate. And of course, Y is our income. So when we go into recession, the government, by design, is naturally collecting less taxes. It's an automatic thing. It kind of kicks in automatically. Well, that gives us G greater than T, and so this amount of dollars here is the deficit. This vertical distance is the deficit, where government spending is this amount. Maybe I'll throw some numbers on here and just, government spending is 4 trillion, and tax revenues are 2 trillion. And so we have a $2 trillion deficit. Okay, questions or comments on that? Well, it also would work the other way, though. In theory, ideally, if the economy is heating up and we start to get beyond our potential over here at, let's call it, the actual level of GDP is to the right now, tax collections go up, right? We have high income, so tax revenues go up. The government's collecting more money. So at Y2, and maybe, I was going to try to, well, maybe I don't need to be that fancy. We'll just go like this. So tax revenues go up. Less people on welfare, less unemployment claims, less food stamps, because the economy's doing good, right? They got jobs, government spending goes down, and so we get a surplus. All right, so now we've got this notion that, hey, this automatic stabilizer thing might be kind of helping out people, help stabilize the economy, people lose their job. Now they've got some unemployment check coming in and some other money to help keep spending up, and we had this insurance thing. So I think most economists, not all economists, would say that that's okay, and I'm actually one of them. I don't mind there being a deficit. This concept makes sense to me, right? That we can have a little bit of a social safety net, and we go back and forth, and it kind of evens out. But what have I said is the reality of the United States for the last 50 years? Which one do we have more of? The green or the red?
Red.
The red. So apparently this is not what we're doing, right? Because we would not have 40 or 50 years of consistent red with maybe one green year. So apparently what's happening is we're designing our policies. Now I really wish I had my golf club. This is a good golf club moment. So I will use my hand. The location of the kind of normal long-run equilibrium of the economy is not here the way our policymakers are doing it. It must be somewhere over here. And so what really happens year after year is sometimes there's a really big deficit, sometimes there's a little small deficit. Big deficit, small deficit, big deficit, small deficit, and before you know it, we're $30 trillion in debt. Does that make sense? So it seems like our policymakers don't get it, that this would be kind of a good way to help maybe smooth out the economy. And so something's kind of wrong with our system, in my opinion, that we're not having more surpluses if it's ideal to do this, and rather we're making your grandkids broke by putting a higher and higher burden. The spending that we're doing today is going to be passed along to your children and your grandchildren. So congratulations.
So it's just short-sightedness?
Yeah, pretty much. A lot of politics is short-sightedness, right? The election's coming up in this year, 2 years, 4 years. I'm going to be up for re-election or whatever, so their window is always a little too small relative to what might be good, efficient, long-term thinking.
Should the terms be longer then?
Oh, that gets into another thorny issue. It's just, there's not a lot of ideal setups. Jesse asked, should the terms be longer? And there's maybe some mechanisms to try to do that, or you have actually some shorter terms with more turnover, so that gets in a little beyond our class here. So, all right, everybody got this down though with the automatic stabilizers? Any questions? All right, so the thing we heard in the video yesterday, I wanted to actually put a little bit more on the tax system as well. So let's see, I guess, yeah, we'll do this as a side note here. So the tax system in the USA is a progressive system. A progressive system. And this ends up being a little bit on this automatic stabilizer business. So this increases the stabilizer effect more than a flat tax. So our simple equation over here says little t. And this could be like an average of the tax rates or whatever, or it could be like some sort of flat tax. So you'll hear some people, I don't agree with them, say that, well, we should just have a flat tax where everybody gets taxed at 10% or something. And so, there's some nice aspects of that, but I think the progressive system is better, and I do have people disagree with me on this. So what's the progressive system? Well, have you heard the saying, the more you make, the more they take? The more you make, the more they take. They being the government, you being your paycheck. The more you make, the more they take. And so we'll spend a little more time on this later too, but the actual tax rate is a marginal tax rate. And so for instance, let's do some income levels here. 0 to 10,000, your tax rate, so your marginal T, little t, is 0%. Kansas looks like it's going to pass this law pretty shortly on altering their tax system to being kind of a two-tiered thing, similar to this. And then let's say, again, I'm just making up numbers, from 10,000 to 40,000, we're going to charge you 10%. And then, oops, I didn't mean to put a percent sign there. 40,000. And then 40,000 to infinity, we zap you at, let's just make it 30%, just for fun. Now, for most principal students starting off, if you're currently making 40,000, it doesn't look very good to bump into the next tax bracket at 41,000, right? If you go from 40,000, you're in this bracket, but if you make 41,000, it's going to bump you into the next bracket. That would be pretty dumb if it bumps you into the 30% bracket, right? Well, it turns out that's a misunderstanding of what the progressive tax system is. It's not your whole income, but rather your marginal income that goes into that. So, example, if your income equals 41,000, what is your big T? So how that's going to work is we're going to take each bracket and build up to it. So for $10,000, you're going to pay 0%, equals $0 in tax. Your next 30,000, 10 to 40, that falls into the next bracket. And you're going to pay 10%. 10% of 30,000 is $3,000. But you're making 41,000, so now your last $1,000 is going to be taxed at the highest bracket, which means you've now got $300 taxed. And so at an income level of 41,000, big T equals the sum of this 3,300. So big T equals $3,300. And if somebody has a non-phone calculator, Justin, yeah, you've been kind of my calculator guy. I don't know if anybody else does it. I'd like to calculate the average tax rate. So the average tax rate for our hypothetical person here is big T over their income, which is 3,300 over 41,000. And what do you get for that? 3,300 divided by 41,000. 8%, Haj? Is give me a couple decimals. Is it 0.08 something?
0.08048780.
So, hold on just a couple. All right, so 0.04 was it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's call it 0.04. So, the average tax rate for this person was 8%. They ended up paying 8% of their income. What do you think Patrick Mahomes' average tax rate is under this system? How much did he make this year, roughly?
Who's
Patrick Mahomes is the Kansas City Chiefs quarterback that is arguably the best quarterback playing in the game today. So he's the top paid quarterback. I'm sure there's going to be a couple people that disagree. There's a couple other great quarterbacks playing as well, but anybody guess roughly? Just give me a number. What do you think? 13 million? That's fair. I think it's actually like 40 million. I'm not positive though. So with his contract and stuff. So my point is, what do you think Patrick Mahomes with not, let's call it 41 million. So maybe $41 million worth of income. What do you think his average tax rate basically is? If you followed this exact program, 30%. It's probably 29.99999999999999999, right? Because only 30,000 of 41 million got taxed at 10%. The rest of it all got taxed at 30%. So he's probably paying basically 30% of 41 million is the tax revenue generated by Patrick Mahomes. Okay, so any questions or comments there? So the point is that with the progressive tax, that would change kind of the steepness of this curve relative to a flat tax. And so it will further collect more income, but it also further not take as much income if the economy falls into recession. So it makes this thing kind of a little more tilted when we have a progressive tax system. All right, good on that, especially with tax day coming right around the corner. All right, last thing here is on the paradox of thrift. So this was in our video, and
Wait, last thing has been now?
no, we're not done with the class, but we're done with this chapter.
Oh.
But it is getting closer to an hour. We're having a lot of fun, isn't it? Time flies when you're having fun, the good old saying. All right, so the paradox of thrift. Paradox of thrift. What's a paradox in general? Oh, that's a paradox, isn't it? What do you think of paradox? Is it something normal? Would you say if something's a paradox, is it something normal, easily understood, kind of the regular average thing? No, it's something unusual, right? So something kind of counterintuitive. And so here's the paradox of thrift. Okay, the idea that when many households try to simultaneously, all at the same time, try to simultaneously to increase their savings, actual savings may fail to increase. Because of the reduction in consumption, which is our C from our cigarettes. Because of the reduction in consumption, will reduce income and employment. All right, so let's get that down and then we'll unpack it a little bit. So this is where we kind of think at the macro level versus the micro level. So here's our macro, here's our little island we live on. And so each person is making a decision about whether to consume some money or save their money. So we talked about in this chapter the marginal propensity to consume, the MPC. I'm going to get $1,000, or let's just make it $100. I have $100 worth of income, and I might put 90 of it to beer, pizza, and chicken wings, and put $10 of it to savings. And so what this is saying is that if a bunch of people all of a sudden increase their savings, and all people are going from $10 to $15, that reduces the amount of beer, pizza, and chicken wings that are being purchased. And if that's the case, then we have less jobs, less employment, less of a multiplier effect in the system. All right, so Keynes kind of brought this one up, and this one's been kind of busted as well, more than kind of busted. The evidence doesn't really reflect there very well, but that was the thought. So if consumption goes down for the nation, there is not as much of a multiplier effect. And so the decrease in Y and the increase in unemployment lead to less overall, lead to less savings overall. Okay, so this is not a good story. So not true overall. It was one of the arguments that Keynes made, but it misses out on some other factors of money channeling through and how quickly prices might adjust, and maybe most importantly, where savings goes. So I'm going to start you off with, recall our cigarettes. Y equals C plus I plus G plus X. So this argument would be, hey, if people start saving more, if if people change their minds and say, gosh, I think in general, let's make this 85 and this 15. Where does the money go? Where do you guys put your savings? Where does your savings go? Bank account, right? So typically bank account, you might shove some of it under your mattress, but if it's a decent amount, you're just carrying that in the bank. Does the bank always have 100% of your money? No. What does the bank do to make money? They loan it out, right. And so who are they loaning it to from our loanable funds market from last week, was setting up these 4 markets. Who's the primary borrower? Government's one of them, but they're not actually the primary one. What kind of people? We got households, businesses, and government, and the rest of the world. All of them, by the way, would do a little bit of this borrowing, but we had the primary borrower is which one? It's not, households are our primary savers, actually. So they are the ones doing the saving for us. Businesses borrowing for expansion investment. Where do businesses fall on this equation? If you had to pick one. Consumption, investment, government spending, or net exports? Investment, right? So that was the purchases of new equipment and machines and all that. So part of what Keynes misses out on, because there's such a focus on consumption, is the fact that that money's just going to be diverted into other sectors. So when there's a decrease in consumption, that leads to an increase in savings, which then gets channeled into an increase in investment. And that's the big thing that the paradox of thrift misses out on. So kind of the key part here is if there's a decrease in, or an increase in savings, it goes to banks that loan it out to businesses. And there's an increase in investment. There's another part of this that is a positive if we go to savings, that again Keynes overlooked with focusing in on consumption, is that if overall the economy has shifted from beer, pizza, and chicken wings to tractors, equipment, and computers, what does our little island look like next year? If we do more beer, pizza, and chicken wings, they get pooped out tomorrow, right? Human body, do we have to have a little biology thing or not? So we eat and then it comes out our rear ends, right? Versus investment, where if now we've shifted into tractors, buildings, equipment, computers, are those things pooped out in the same way? Do they disappear after 1 year? Sometimes, but most of them no, right? The equipment, those purchases of investment, some of them could be exhausted in 1 year, but tractors, computers, we get a couple good solid 3 years hopefully out of a new computer, and maybe up to 5 years depending on how you're using it and stuff. The tractor, we have 40-year-old tractors that are still pretty productive. They still serve the purpose that they have. And so if we've now shifted money out of beer, pizza, and chicken wings and into things that have longer lifespans, what's happening to the resources in the economy that year? What's happened to the resources? Have they gone up or down in terms of the quantity of resources?
Down.
Why down?
Because you need the resources to make more tractors, computers, and everything.
No. I'm talking about what the next year. So this was 20. Let me be a little more clear here. So 2023, we have a decrease in consumption and an increase in investment. And so we had the quantity of resources in 2023 equal to, at the start of 2023, maybe I should put January 1st if we want to be, probably tells the story a little bit better. January 1st, 2023, we had a quantity of resources of 100, and now we decreased by 5 of consumption and we increased by 5. So what does the resource base look like January of 24? Is it higher or lower because I did a -5 plus 5 here? Higher. Yeah, so this is important in that now we have a quantity of resources equal to 105 in 2024. Where does that fall on your shifter list? Quantity of resources. Go back to your shifter list. What thing shifts when there's more resources in the economy? Long. Which curve? We got 3 curves there. Which one is moving? Or possibly which ones if there's multiple? What is the big driver for the long term? One of them, one of the shifters. Long run aggregate supply shifter. Give me a. What? More of it was capital, yeah. And so if we have more capital, the quantity of resources, what's happening to this long run aggregate supply curve? Is it moving to the right or to the left? To the right. So we're just kind of now unleashing some power of economic growth through having more investment rather than consumption. And so this one is a good thing for future economic growth as well as what was happening today. All right, we will pick up there. Well, that wraps up the chapter. So Monday, keep your eyes open. We might do some unique stuff because I am presenting in Las Vegas.